Hello, welcome to the Substrate sync for the week of November 19th. Got a full agenda today. So, Yongchu, do you want to take it away?
Yes. So I need to drop off in the middle because of the conflict, but I'll be quick. So I have like two of like my PR. Like one is the basically aggregate adding another field or message in the aggregate rel to uh, basically describe some discrepancy in behavior across like engines. So one of that is some esoteric like edge case around like empty grouping set handling in. So SQL Server and Oracle have one behavior, and the rest of the wall, have another behavior. So I want to include that in the thing. So I mean, there are like multiple ways to do this, but I just happen to aggregate rel is complex thing, so maybe there is another issues will be there. So I just created a message that basically we can just keep adding all these behaviors in that message rather than just polluting like everything. So that's like one approach. So please take a look. I'd love to hear what you're thinking. The second one is it's been open for a while. I have to revive it because now we actually need to move on. So it's supporting ties within the fetch rel. So this is like another like SQL offset with ties thing. So the proposal is adding a field to represent, okay, you are in counting tie mode, and then actually adding the sort order in the fetch rel. So that there's like some discussion back and forth in the past, but my conclusion is basically, it's in the end, like it boils down to the equality comparison of the last row, like last n row, and then you need to basically keep comparing quality of that columns, the sort whatever all the columns to the following rows. And then that equality is like, it's not simple. I mean, it could be collation based equality or whatever. Basically, it's sort order. So I came back to, I thought about it, and then I came back to like, there's no better than like sort order to express that thing. So so I'd love to start to discuss it again, but please take a look. The last one is the someone, I forgot the name, but he did like wonderful contributions to clarifying the advanced extensions. I thought the Ben also commented out. I think it's a very good addition to the doc. So, and it's been sitting there again. I think he did update it first proposed like in July. So it's been sitting there for a while. So please take a look. I think there's some minor edit is needed, but other than that, it looks good to me. So that's just call for attention, and I'll Victor.
Yeah, hello. We've been thinking about lambdas at work a bit. I think that's a prior discussion, but we're also trying to think about, this has come up before, where you have some engine-specific function that exists that you can recompose into like standard substrate, right? So it's like, oh, I have like a Trino SQL element that function, but it's weird because it returns false instead of null. You can think of it as like, oh, element that coalesce with like true, right? But what we're thinking about is, can we express that mapping in like the dialect? So say, hey, we have like a Trino SQL dialect or this Trino function, which represents this standard, composition of operators. And it ends up being, oh, a lambda is actually kind of perfect for that. In some ways I've been coding, it's like, take the function arguments and then rewrite it. This is fortuitous. Ben's been working on lambdas, and the issue that we run into in some ways because of this is, I would like in the extension file or dialect file some way to encode, take this function and write it in terms of these other functions. But that means that we need to have some way to like call functions or at least express function composition in the dialect.
Mm-hmm.
And fortuitously, Ben's been working on this from the perspective of lambdas, and he's added to like the test format that exists a way to call functions. So it's for testing like array transform and various things. Actually, Ben, do you have if you can link to one of your tests, that would be good. Where it's like, hey, we have array transform of this list, where it's like this lambda which consumes these functions should output this thing, right? We were thinking it might make sense to reuse the test language in the dialects for like composing and calling these functions. Does that make sense?
I just pasted a link to a line of the PR, if that's helpful.
Well, this still isn't final. Oh, there we go.
The expressions.
Yeah, like you're calling map with like, oh, I want to call multiply on this. But for like expressing composition, you end up needing a way to call functions and also put literals in it. But we don't really have a way to do that yet. So effectively, the TLDR is adding a little mini DSL for calling functions and constants in the dialects and possibly even in the extensions themselves. We still need to spec this out, but this is mostly me being like, are there any like, does it seem like a terrible idea, or this is worth pursuing?
I want to go down that rabbit hole. It seems like it could get like arbitrarily complex.
Yes, potentially.
Yeah, I was going to say my main initial thought, having not thought about it much, is it seems more fundamental than a dialect thing.
And a dialect. Or, yeah. In what sense, I guess?
I mean, it seems like an expression.
I guess they are totally arbitrary expressions.
So I don't fully understand why this is part of the dialect. Do you want to define a functions as part of the dialect specification? Is that the goal?
Or in the dialects, we're starting to define mappings from. So we're using dialects and we're starting to use dialects for Trino specifically to map from Trino SQL to Substrate, and then map back from Substrate to Trino SQL. And when we map out a Trino SQL, sometimes we need to be able to rewrite functions from like this Trino function is just these standard Substrate functions. We don't have a mechanism to express that rewrite rule effectively.
Yeah, so composition, right? Like I think you're saying like, you can get the Trino function foo as a composition of functions bar and baz that exist already in Substrate. So I think what I was saying is I think there are two different concepts there, which is one is how do we express composition? Because I kind of feel like it's very much the same thing as what Young Chul was asking about in the context of normalizing large expression subtrees. And so I think that having the concept of how we express composition to me feels like a more fundamental thing than something that's related to dialect. I think that once it's defined, then it would make sense for dialects to express that composition rule, if you will, as well. So like,
No, this is very much this is coming up for us in the context of dialects. But to your point, it is like the fundamental problem is how do we express composition? And we want to use it in dialects, but theoretically it should be used anywhere. But we still need some way to express that which we don't have today. Then.
Also, we'll just say, I agree that it's a more fundamental thing and that it's separate, but I can also see a case for this kind of thing being included directly in the YAML files where these things are defined, as opposed to in dialects.
I actually agree with you there. Like if you think about like a reasonable right, like right now we write down the semantics of a function, right, in a that's what the YAML file's purpose is basically, is here's the signature and here's the semantics, right? If the semantics of a function could be defined in a fully specified way by referring to other functions, right? That seems to make a lot of sense in the YAML file, right? Like if you said like, hey, this is, Trino foo, and that is actually built on top of, bar and baz, in this way. That to me is a reasonable way to specify that, as opposed to some human language like we do right now.
No, that would make a lot of sense to add. In some ways, this is like, I guess the data is for system-specific metadata, but the mapping of system-specific function to general is like useful everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. But regardless of whether they are in dialect or in extension YAMLs, the problem is still the same as you point out, Jax, where there's some, how do we express this recomposition?
We need a syntax to.
Yes. You end up needing a small like DSL to do it.
Is
Oh,
this
God.
similar to or different from Lambda expressions?
It seems like it's the same to me.
Yeah, I thought this was kind of the whole point of the discussion, to say, like, could we just recycle the way that we will eventually define lambdas in line for the test framework whenever that actually happens? Could we just use the same syntax wherever we end up using this thing?
And I guess to your point, are they lambdas? I guess they are, in the sense that like the way I thought of expressing a recomposition is cool. The function takes 2 arguments. So the composition is a lambda which takes 2 arguments followed by the new thing you replace it with. So it's like a inline replacement effectively.
Yeah, the way that I initially sort of respond to it is that there's the concept of unbound expressions, and Lambda is a specific version of that. That would be kind of how I think about it. But like if we
unbound.
it just means that the arguments are not bound. Right?
We have actually updated the lambda proposal as well. We've split out between the extension has func now. So like we have higher order functions that take functions, and then the lambda is a mechanism to express them in the expression tree. We have split that out a little bit in the lambda proposal, which is related to what we're talking about. Yeah,
These definitions are we talking about something that goes in the plan or something that goes in YAML files?
it would go into YAML.
And then
I think
when
that
you
it would
create-
exist in both places. So I'm going to disagree with. I'm not saying that the proposal that Victor and Ben are working on. I'm saying that from my point of view, like the same problem exists in the context of a normalized subtree or something like that, or like a prepared statement.
Can you elaborate on that, Chuck? Like, because one thing you can do is if they're in the YAML, then they just show up in the plan as regular typical expressions.
Yeah.
What do you mean by prepared
Well,
statement?
so couple of things, right? One is that in multiple systems, a user can express a user-defined lambda in the context of a query, right? It's not like it's a predefined thing, right? And so in the context of how our YAML files work, they're not things that things that users can use, but not things that users can construct. So it seems like it's a bit of a mismatch there. But then I'd say, to me, an unbound expression is an unbound expression, whether it's unbound because it's embedded somewhere in the expression tree, or because the entire expression tree is unbounded because it's a prepared statement. They feel like the same thing to me. I'm not saying that they are, maybe they aren't. I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about it, but it feels like they're the same thing. And then there's the discussion we had before about normalized sub-expression trees, which maybe aren't unbound. I think maybe in John Chul's case, they aren't unbound. They're actually bound. But it seems like if you're going to pull them out of the tree because you're pointing at 2 different tables, let's say, with the same expression tree, you're going to have to unbind them. So those are examples to me that seem like they're in the plan, not in the YAML files. But I haven't thought a lot about this.
In the YAML, because it's very much like you could represent it in the plan using one thing, and the YAML gives you the information to be like, I need to rewrite this, just replace it in line.
Yeah, I'm not saying that they only are in the plan.
No.
I feel like they're in both places, which is interesting because I think this is the first situation where we have that.
And one thing about lambdas as well, which Ben and I were discussing earlier, that comes up, which is, in theory, if you have named expressions in the plan, you could be like, oh, I have a plan level function composition that I can put in a lambda call, right? Theoretically, or whenever you expect a lambda. However, not all lambdas can be expressed that way because you might define in this project, define a lambda that combines arguments from some input along with field references in that specific context. So it's not like you can generate lambdas which actually pull like field references from input, so you can't express that as an anonymous function at the plan level. So it depends on the context in which it's in, if that makes sense.
I mean, my initial response, I think I understand what you're saying, but my initial response is that's maybe just a different kind of reference. Like you're saying, like there are two kinds of variables in this lambda. And so, and one of those types, it has to be in the context of the call. And I feel like, okay, well, that we probably can't have that be the case. Like it probably needs to still be able to express some way that it references its references into its context.
Potentially. You could imagine threading in the
my gut on this is actually, and maybe you've done this in the patch. I have not looked at the patch, but my gut on this is that this is an example of like cataloging several different examples of what we want it to do. Like here's 5 concrete examples, right? Because we're talking very abstractly right now, and it feels like maybe writing 5 or 10 concrete examples of these are the things that we want to do. And then deciding, are these all the same thing? Or maybe these are 2 or 3 different things, right? Like it could be that we're saying like, hey, one of the ways you can find functions in YAML files is you can find a composite function. And that's one thing we're going to do. And it's completely independent of lambdas. Right? Because that kind of solves the sort of more dialect mapping challenge, right? And maybe that's a dialect thing only. Maybe we decided it's that. Or maybe we say it should be. My feeling is it actually should be in the YAML files, not the dialect. But
I'm on board for that.
Yeah.
But that may be. And so anyway, to me, it's like writing down all the things. My gut is it's easy to solve some of these smaller problems. The only concern I have is that once we solve the real problem, all the smaller ones can actually leverage that rather than be their own sort of independent islands.
I will say, Ben's standalone lambda thing, I think, is almost ready for review, and it has a lot of examples and stuff because that's how we work. So it's quite nice.
Yeah.
I was
I'll talk about
backing
it
up
more
his work for my own stuff, which is much more harebrained and not as spec stuff.
At least like the way I look at it is it's all about the capture and the capture and just referencing the regular parameter. Lambda has the only difference between the lambda and the other basically named expressions or whatever is the existence of the capture, whether the capture is empty or not. So lambda certainly has a capture, like the variable references or whatever, based on the where it is declared. So, but if you just pull it out as a plan level or even YAML, I mean, you don't have any such capture because I mean nothing to capture. So, so in that sense, like I think it's fair to, if we structure these whatever generic expression things in that model, then actually we can use that with I don't know, basically like whatever it looks like a function, like we just plug in that framework, and that's my take. So I love to actually standardize whatever this Ben's proposal, and then actually generalize it or expand it to represent this like just global, let's say global functions, standalone functions, and then we can start to. And I also ask to add a call, because that call will be actually using it will enable the composition naturally. So that's how I see the problem. So yeah.
I think at this point I might just cut this off and say we should go look at Ben's lambda proposal, and then I can follow up with more concrete plans for composition. So Ben, is it ready, or do you still need a couple hours or days?
Yeah, I am the next item in the list, and it feels like we're basically already talking about it now. So basically, it's very close to ready. the things that are stopping it are actually partially not things that really have anything to do with lambdas. As part of this PR, I wanted to include a bunch of examples of the actual lambda usage to make the docs clear. And as part of the inclusion of those examples, I wanted to have CI/CD actually validate that these examples conform to the protobuf specification in the same way that I previously set up with the YAML examples. But it turns out how I had done it is not working. And so now I'm trying to fix it to make that work, which doesn't really have anything to do with lambdas in particular. But I think I can get that working. But if it ends up being too much of a pain, I can just do it in a separate PR too. But
Is
I
that
think
what
by
the
end of
minus
the day-
minus 8 is?
Yes, that is exactly what that is. Basically embed into the thing.
I had that chat. I was like, what is that? I keep
Yeah.
seeing it, and I'm like, I don't know what
Those
this
are
is.
scissors. Little
I
handle.
don't love having to use these
Scissors.
scissors. It would be better to have it in line, but
Snipping out that section of code.
I had tried to research if there was a way to solve this problem that was standardized, that wasn't just having these examples in separate files, and I couldn't find one that had more than like 3 stars on GitHub. So
I guess for context, for you who weren't looking at this earlier, Ben, all the examples in the Markdown used to be like just in the text. He pulled all of them out into standalone files and now references them into Markdown. That means in CI, we can check that the protobufs that we're putting in the website are actually valid, which is kind of important. Turns out not all of them were, which is a problem. So that's why that's what we're talking about now. So it sounds like, Ben,
yes,
the actual like Lambda content in terms of like how to express lambdas is like mostly ready, and the like
yes,
documentation and running CI's part of it is like a blocker, or is the
exactly.
thing they're working on. So technically, we can review the content and we can hit CI for wrench, behind the scenes.
Yes. I think that the actual proto file changes are ready to be reviewed. The doc changes, I need to do some more passes on, including the CI/CD stuff, but I should be able to finish that today. Cool. And I don't know if there's anything else to say, but I'll undraft it when it's truly ready, and then if everyone can take a look, that'd be great.
Awesome.
I think I have a couple of the next items, but they're all very fast. Well,
Yo, Chul, do you think you'll have time to look at this? The
Which
Lambda
one?
thing? The Lambda thing
Yes,
when it gets done.
I left like a bunch of comments and Ben was addressing those. I'll
Okay,
take
great.
another look.
I will as well.
Cool. Appreciate it.
Okay, yeah, just the rapid fire things. One is just I had a PR open for introducing a JSON type into the spec. I know that we kind of went back and forth on whether or not we could really handle something like that or not, but the one that I introduced is basically just, an opaque thing with the kind of struct representation so that you can send it as a literal in plans, and their representation is just as a raw string. So I don't know if anyone has any opinions, but if anyone wants to give a review, that would be great.
And for everyone looking
Your
at it,
link is wrong.
I just updated the link so
I
I know
know.
it's not the invalid test. So the link
Thanks.
is not up to date. There we go.
Thanks.
So, yeah,
I
it's
hope
just
my
adding,
other
it's just adding
ones are
JSON as an
correct too.
extension type, so not a core type, which is I think kind of nice.
Oh yes, it's an extension type. I should have made that clear. Yes. Okay. Next item, if there's nothing else to say there, I have like a really tiny PR, which is basically I was trying to make an update to Substrate Go, and I was having difficulties, and it's not useful to get into the details of why I was having difficulties, but basically I think that there's a test case inside the core repository that just doesn't make sense, where the test case is comparing equals of 2 types which are technically not the same. They're really 2 versions of decimal, but they have different values for the integer type parameters. So it's a PR just to delete that one line.
That should be valid. Why is that not valid?
Why is it valid?
Because precision and scale are things that can be different between two parameters and be fine.
But I guess is decimal 2.3 the same as decimal 2.4 at the type level? Those are different types, aren't they?
Yeah, the definition of equals is any one matching with an any one.
I
So
think that
it's
we
valid.
probably need to do a better job on clearing that up because that is a valid test.
It's valid SQL. It's
That's
questionable.
That's not well. Why do we care about that? I would say, if you want to,
Right.
you should cast it to the right types.
What probably is wrong is that the equals should be defined as any one, like decimal P1 S1, decimal P2 S2.
That would be fine with me too.
You're
Yeah,
gonna have a
so I think
decimal-
that's the correction. I don't think it's the removal of the test. I think
You
that
would have a
that
decimal
equals is
specific
fine.
equality comparison.
What's that?
You would have like a decimal specific equality comparison.
Or can you do N32 equals N64?
No,
So why can you do it for decimals?
Are you suggest I'm trying to figure out because the permutations are too high otherwise. I mean, I think that's the answer.
Okay.
I think what we expect from users, if you want to compare N32 to N64, is that you have to do N32 past the I64, equality of those two things. So we force the upcast on the user.
I guess with decimals, it's not obvious that there would be a safe upcast.
But then
Like,
why
how's
would
the
we make
actual-
comparison?
How's the actual comparison going to be done? It's going to be an upcast, right?
Sorry, I need to drop off.
No, same answer.
Get you next meeting. Yeah.
It's to me, upcast is a weird thing to say because it's not let's say you're comparing the thing is that you're comparing there's not necessarily an upcast.
Yeah,
Right?
I see what you're saying.
Okay. I mean, I haven't thought a lot about this. I agree with the comment about we don't do implicit casts. I'm just trying to figure out in actually trying to translate something, what is the realistic solution here? Yeah, if you have,
You could define a integer comparison function too that allowed integers and unsigned integers to be compared that didn't actually cast one to the other. So it could do things like -1 equals U32 max plus 1 without crashing. Whereas trying to do that with upcast, there's no way you could do it. So it's just maybe this happens to be defined for decimal generally.
And I guess what I'll say is it sounds like we're actually in agreement that equality and functional comparison with anyone can only be used on types that are the same. We might want overloaded equality for things like decimal with different positions, but that would be a separate thing. So to Ben's point, that test is wrong for that function because that's an invalid call.
Do we have overloads? I guess it would just be the normal equality doesn't apply to this.
You'd have to put it in functions decimal and then have functions decimal and decimal equal or something and then do that overload.
Yeah. Okay.
But why couldn't you just add it as an implementation in the list to the standard equals? Just curious.
Well, standard equals doesn't even have decimal in its impulse.
No, I see what you're saying, Ben. You could have decimal or equals anyone as one of the impulse and then equals decimal as another. One. But then you get into a weird thing where it's just what version?
We don't have that, right? We don't. I think we specifically said we don't have multiple bindings that would be legal in the same file or not allowed.
That's
Wait, sorry, say that one more time.
You can't have two implements that both could apply to the same expression or same arguments. That's a violation.
Just to take a
we're trying to
even
keep
more
it simple.
extreme example.
There's no overloading.
You couldn't have any and any as one impl and then any and any as another one. Just obviously that one's dumb, but Okay.
Yeah,
That,
exactly.
that one explodes because the type signatures end up being the same, so you can't know how to map. If you had anyone, and then decimal, decimal, that wouldn't blow anything up, but it does feel weird for me. Like we don't, to your point, Jeff, we don't have overloading about use a more specific one. You'd have to pick one at like producer time, and then you should pick like.
I guess it's okay though. I mean, I guess my statement is wrong though, because the Substrate doesn't define any resolution.
No. You
Right?
have to
Your
pick one at
producer is going to
producer.
find resolution. So
Yeah.
I guess we don't have a rule against that. I was just trying to remember because I kind of feel like there's a case, there's an example case of this already, I thought.
If you have a function with like the same signature in two places in a single extension, it blows up, and that makes sense. You can't resolve that uniquely.
Right. But having functions with different signatures in the same file is fine, even if they have the same. Yeah. So I think Ben's statement actually is valid.
Yeah.
That you could have a second impl, which is decimals. The part that's confusing
I'm not
here.
saying that
This
that's
is yeah. You know, the part that's confusing here to me is that the Weston's comment about like, you know, I don't even know what his comment was, but like yeah, I agree that the current state, if the current state is anyone, that this is an invalid test. I think that I can't imagine any system that doesn't support this. That's true. Or sorry, this example is false for sure, of course. But the better version of this example, that's the true version of this test, I'm pretty sure every system you go to is going to say that that's true, which means that we're missing something. Right? If that was 11, if it was 11 and 11.00, for example. So.
Well, I guess to Ben's original problem, that test is wrong. We can delete it, and then we can file a different issue for like, do we want to allow this kind of stuff, and what's the best way to handle it?
Sounds good to me.
More doc updates, Ben.
Okay, well, that one was a one-line change, and it took more discussion than I thought. So hopefully these ones will be
Types are
quick as I promised. Basically, I just have two more PRs open, which are just doc updates that I'm hoping someone could take a look at. One of them is another clarification on URNs. Basically, there are different ways that the spec has been interpreted across libraries. That's my fault, I guess. And I guess this is my throwing in the wrench to make it just stupid, simple, and obvious. There's just a regex, and it says this is the definition. And it's URN-like, but it's not exactly a URN. And we can talk about it in the PR if we want a different fix. But the regex that I introduced is what is actually done right now in Substrate Java, Substrate Go, and Substrate Python. So, yeah.
The main restriction is like we don't allow colons in like the last name space. You only have 2 colons total in the string. Right, Ben?
Yes, basically.
Whereas like with URNs would have arbitrary colons. And Ben and I spent like an hour talking about this and being like, okay, these are like URNs except for all of these things. And we kept going back and forth on this. And that's the part I was like, should we just use URN inspired and just have the restricted things? This is what they are. They're URN inspired. They are not URNs per se. The amount of energy we were spending telling people like, these are like this except for these cases was more than just being like, here's what they are.
So just I'm going to put a crazy question in here. So I can put a line break in. That's okay. It's very weird that you've got a not closure as opposed to like a positive. Like these are the things that are allowed as opposed to these are the things that are not allowed. I'm like, so I can put like 700 spaces in here and that's fine.
Okay, how
But, like,
about
yeah, your regex is incomplete too.
it's incomplete.
Well, I guess it's not incomplete. I take that back. So you can have an unlimited number of things that are not colon. So I can have 5,000 line breaks followed by colon followed by 5,000 line breaks.
The point is taken. I will adjust it so that it's, how about only alphanumeric characters, dashes, and underscores,
If
And
the
that's
main
it.
complaint
And letters,
is that
yeah.
it's not restrictive
and
enough, I think
letters,
we're on
and
the same page.
periods.
If it needs to be more
Yeah,
restrictive,
yeah, I-
I agree. Okay.
Yeah, I think restrictive is good. So I'd say good idea to add the regex. I'm super supportive of that. Let's make it. Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
No,
okay,
I'm
I will
not.
fix that.
You're
I will
not
fix
allowed to use Z's or S's.
And then the last one is just a very small doc update where I just added an example of a thing that wasn't as obvious to me when I was trying to figure out in the first place. And it's an example of how you actually represent user-defined types using the structure business.
Do you have an example where how you represent it when it isn't? You aren't using the thing?
Well, when you aren't using the thing, it's just like a generic protobuf any, and it's kind of on everyone else to figure out how to actually represent that.
Got it.
I could
Part
include
of
an
the
example
definition of the
there.
type.
You might just put a reference there for that as well, but yeah. I mean,
Okay.
it doesn't block this, but
Cool.
So if a type has a structure, then it has this implicit potential representation.
Yes. That was my interpretation.
And well, you're saying could be encoded as, and you're giving it JSON, but it would actually need to go into protobuf, right?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So literal struct message.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. So if I'm reading this plan, like, do I assume it's always using the structure? I was never sure if like structure meant there's two possible ways that you could represent this literal, or like if it has a structure, then this is the only way to represent. Like if I'm reading that plan and I see that any, can I just go ahead and say, oh, this one has a structure, so I'm going to decode that as a literal struct? Or do I need to look at the type URL and say, if it's a little struct, go down this path. If it's something else, maybe I go down this other path.
Well, my interpretation was that if it's a literal struct, it won't be in any. It will be the actual. You'll decode it properly. There's like a one of if it's either an any or it's a struct representation. So if it's the struct representation, then you know what it is and you can see it. And if it's an any, then you just always treat it opaquely, and it's always up to the producer and consumer to know what that means.
Yeah, the way I've understood it is the structure gives you a mechanism to be like, I am a producer. I do not know my target system, but I can represent this type using a struct, and it knows how to interpret it. On the other side, if you control both ends of the pipe, you can be like, cool, I know what this type is. Here's my custom binary encoding. Don't even worry about it.
Yep. I see the one F now. I thought it was always in any. My bad.
No, it's not good.
are you guys, so the fact that you're interacting with this suggests that you are working with user-defined types, at least some.
Yes.
Are you using, so I feel like this was a premature feature. And so I feel like maybe others have felt that way as well. And so I'm curious, are you finding yourselves mostly using the any version or the struct version?
To clarify, what do you mean about what was the premature feature that you're?
The struct concept in the user-defined type.
So the reason why I've been interfacing with this is actually because we have our own internal representation of JSON, which is basically identical to the one that I introduced, which is we use this struct representation and it has a content field, which is just a string. So we have this representation, but it turned out that Substrate Java and Substrate Go don't actually handle this representation. So then the other Datadog people on the call can probably speak to this more, but they basically introduced a hack, which is instead of ever representing JSON literals within their plans, they would just have strings wrapped around with a function call around them called like QJSON or something. And so I wanted to be able to get rid of that call, and I found this structure representation, and so then I started exploring it and then realized it's not in the upstream libraries. So
it's funny because I've gone the always use the any route. So like in your case, I would use any and Google like the protobuf, the standard types, there's a string value. So I would just use any with a string value. But I had to define, because Arrow's type system is bigger than Substrate's type system. So I defined a bunch of user-defined types for arrow, and most of them uses any with like a slightly wider built-in protobuf type. So like int32 is a int64 erg value. Or sorry, uint32 is an int64 value.
I mean, I'm curious to hear why you think it's a half-baked idea, because I in general am not a lover of the usage of any's when they can be avoided, because it's just like more things you have to manage. You know, it becomes another proto message that you have to recognize the type URL for, both at producer and consumer at every step of the chain. So,
if it's struct, aren't you hand parsing at that point? Like I can just give this to protobuf and I get back I can say, oh, this is a the user defined type is uint632. I know that's encoded as an int64 value, so I just hit protobuf, I get an int64. Whereas if I hit the struct, then I would have to say, okay,
Yeah. So Ben,
blah.
the key difference is that in Weston's case, he's using types that are already built into protobuf as opposed to custom types. So any automatically can resolve.
Weston's controlling both ends, because he knows what the any is. He can handle it internally. I assume you're not
Well,
doing
remember, any's encodes the type name in the value.
yes.
Right. And so if the type is already registered into protobuf, then protobuf can resolve it and give you back the right object type.
But your target system still needs to know, okay, I have an any, I've mapped it, it's this arrow type, I've mapped it to my arrow thing and I can use it, but you still need to know what that is. You still need that mapping from the protobuf specific type to your system.
If you're working in Python, you don't need
That's
any
always
of
the
it.
case.
It just smashes it all together. It's fucking late binding, man.
Yeah. I guess for me, it's always the
JSON,
case
for
where I
example,
know both. Yeah, go ahead.
it's like there is an obvious simple encoding in any you can imagine, which is just to encode it as a string. But you could also imagine making your own proto message called JSON, which has a field called content, which is of type string, and that's what gets passed around. And the thing that I like about the structure representation is it makes it unambiguous how to represent it, because it's part of the extension specification, as opposed to the any approach, where what happens internally is that every team feels like they're taking a guess, and maybe that's on us to have poor organization to say this is what the proto is, but it becomes a thing that we manage instead of a thing managed inside of the extension definition itself. So I'm kind of pro the struct representation.
Yeah, he's a platform team guy. He's like, I'm on the platform team. I don't want these fucking users fucking things up.
I don't think the structure representation is always unambiguous. Like for FP16, I encoded it as a uint16. And so then which if you were doing the structure representation, you'd still have to shove it into some kind of type already.
Put it in bytes,
So,
but yeah.
bytes or uint16, and then define the rules for how to parse it.
There's also weird things that this may come up eventually, but like things like sketches, or if you want to support eventually, and it's like a custom type represents a data sketch where it's like, we're not going to put a struct on that. It's going to be like, here's a binary encoded sketch. Don't even look at it unless you know what it is.
Well, if anyone wants some horror, or wants some extra, they're looking for a task to pick up. Data Fusion, when they jumped on the Substrate, they didn't quite read the user-defined types correctly. So a lot of their user-defined types are implemented as use this other type with a type variation reference.
Oh yeah, that thing. That's
So I'd like to move away from that at some point, but I know like it can't be done now because it's just going to break backwards compatibility for Data Fusion users. But the plans that it produced doing that will probably not be readable anywhere else.
No, they won't. And a lot of them are for like handling like negative numbers and stuff like that. It's like, oh, I encode like uint what is it? No, or signed integers or like
yes, they just use the unsigned.
Yeah,
the unsigned integers use the signed integer with a certain variation reference.
yes.
I think excluding unsigned integers from Substrate is the most controversial thing we did. Well, early on. I don't know. Maybe it was field names. But
Yeah. Sorry, but I guess there are these two ways. I don't see them going away. I mean, I haven't run into, like, again, back to the half-baked, I haven't had problems where like this hasn't worked for me or this has felt unnecessarily complex.
So 3/4 baked
Fair
then?
enough.
Yeah, I think it's baked. You know, it's fully baked. Maybe
I think-
slightly over baked.
Well, I
Yeah,
feel like
one-
Over engineered is probably a better phrase. No, the inspiration to remind people is the separation of logical versus physical types in parquet. There are situations where it is helpful to be able to work with the physical representation in a more detailed manner. Let's say we wanted to do compression or something, I don't know. Even if you don't know the logical definition, right? So, you know, you might have two different may have two different logical things that use the same physical representation. And if you're working in a lower level layer, just being able to support the physical representation, even if you don't know exactly how it's supposed to be represented. Like currency is an example, right? Like currency is basically a specialization of decimal, right? And so saying that those have the same physical representation can be helpful for lower level systems. Oh,
what I'm
Weston,
gonna say is-
we love you.
Ben's clarification is welcome and helpful.
Yes.
And one more point I wanted to raise about that, which could be a part of this PR or could not be a part of it. But I did think that there was something still a little ambiguous about it, which is just what the proper way is to deal with something like type variables that are present in a user-defined type.
Well, you said it was half baked, so once you bake that shit up, it seems like you just baked it a little bit more. Now it's like, you know, 5/8 baked.
Right, so what was the question? How you encode the type parameters in the? Isn't that in like
at the
that's
very
not part of
least?
Little, right?
It seems a little underspecified to say, like, imagine you have a user-defined type, which has a type parameter t, let's say.
Yeah, I
So
need one of those.
yeah. So then in your structure definition, you make use of t. What is t then? Maybe, yeah.
Sounds like a problem for structure definition people.
Boshin's also run into this. He was asking about defining user-defined types where you can do things like, oh, you have a one-off. Or there's like an enumeration in the type, but it's like, where is that defined? Because you were trying to do something like, can you make like a recursive data structure representation?
Well, isn't it already literal structs can have like literal struct can have literal structs? It's already recursive, right? So like I have fixed size lists is one.
This is a type level thing. Like at the type level, can you define the nested struct, which is contains the t, which is either like the value or another nested list.
Yeah. But can't you do that with literal struct already?
Yeah, I think for literals you can, but like for the I guess like for like function arguments or something, like is there a way to, or like as a custom type in the YAML file, I think?
This is related to your question, Boshin. I might bump it above Ben's closing PR thing, which is like, is there like you want to represent like multi-dimensional arrays in function signatures?
Yeah.
Well, either it's a literal or it's a column reference, right? There's nothing in between.
Well,
Yeah, I don't understand.
like,
I don't understand the feature that you're trying. Give a concrete example of what you're trying to do.
for example, like I want to transform a 2D array into a 1D array. And I have a function that takes in an n-dimensional array and returns a one-dimensional array. How do I represent that function signature?
And like the YAML file, like
In the YAML file.
which really takes a two-dimensional array and flattens it.
Yeah.
So this is just to clarify. You have an array type which has two parameters, width and height.
That's two
Like it's like
parameters.
X.
No, it's like
Like-
I mean,
like an
normally
array
I see
type. Like
fixed
you have
size
a-
list
what's
of
your data
fixed size
type?
list of
You have a list of lists. List of lists. List of ints or something.
Okay, you have a list of lists. Okay,
And I guess you
And
don't
you
want
wanna
to
return a list of
Here's
lists.
my flattened list of lists. Here's my flattened list of list of lists. Here's my flattened list of list of list of lists. Here's my flattened list of list of list, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So you're asking about the YAML, how you would
Yeah.
represent that.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, everything I was thinking plans.
Yeah, I just
Weston
realized
doesn't give a shit about YAMLs.
like
Wait, sorry, just to make sure I'm understanding, you're
Yeah.
saying like you want to be able to represent in the YAML and arbitrarily, like a single function
yes.
that can take an arbitrarily nested list and turn it into something flat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that currently possible?
Yeah.
I mean, well, so the I think the thing you're not going to like about it is it really is list of any one to list of any two, right?
Right. Okay.
Like
Is
it's
that the
like
recommended way to go? Yeah.
what's that?
Is that the recommended way to go, or?
I mean, I think that's the way to go right now because we don't have like so when we were first working on types, we wanted to avoid having sort of like more complex type binding rules, right? Like like programming languages, you could say something where it's like define the output type as and then the input type is a derivation of the output type, right? Although that particular example, I'm not sure you could even do that in a programming language. Like formally, I don't think most programming languages have that. Like if you said like list of integer goes to list of integer, sure, you can do that. Can you do list of integer goes to integer, list of integer? I'm not sure that any programming language lets you express both of those things. I'm sure there's one that does, but yeah. So I would say right now that would be the pattern is just list of any to list of any two.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Also,
because the Emmys are not the same because the first one's a list of lists.
Right. Okay.
I guess like it's.
can we be,
Okay.
I was going to say, realistically, is it ever more than 3 deep? Like if we just forget the kind of beauty
Yeah, if
of
it's
this
only at
situation,
most
can we
three
just
deep,
make
then I
3
just define
functions?
two functions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. In practice, probably not.
Yeah. But in
It
theory, like,
reminds me of the Scala hack, which is somewhere there's a file that defines like tuple 1, tuple 2, tuple 3, tuple 4, until like tuple 27, I think. Which mostly works.
I call it the
I've done
Christmas tree
something like
pattern
that
because
before,
it
no
looks like
camel.
a
You can make the case that we might want to support this eventually as a feature, but to Jack's point now, yeah, list of any would be like the best way to do it now.
Gotcha.
Though the point I'm trying to make is I would still rather just have the explicit signature that says.
Yeah, if there's only a couple of dimensionalities, right? If there's like 1 to 10 dimensionalities, yeah, just write 10 implementations that are specific.
And at a certain point, if you have a user that actually wants to do this, you should go talk to that user and be like, what? How are you encoding your data if you don't know how many dimensions you're on?
what function operates on arrays of any size dimensions? I guess like a shape function.
Yeah, I think there's like some cardinality function maybe that you can get like the size of the entire thing, or there's the transform function where you can flatten arrays and stuff.
yeah, I think it's we have some users which use our JSON, and they may want to take their nested list in their JSON, flatten it in some way. So that's kind of the use. But technically, you can have an NRE.
Well, then if we get my JSON type in, then it could just be a function from JSON to JSON.
That's true too. Yeah.
Yeah, but so doing everything is going to be you're keeping the JSON as a JSON string throughout, which has its own fun problems for compatibility and such. But there's the other way of dealing with it is you ingest it, and then you read it in as JSON as your source, and then you have real types from then on.
You cut out at the very beginning, or I don't know if everyone heard
Yeah.
correctly, but
So
So
we are close to time. So, is there any final points we want to talk about? I think now would be a good time. Otherwise, I can shut down. Oh yeah, I'll turn off the recording. Well, go ahead.
Oh yeah, we were promised.
I did have one last item on the list. We don't even have to have a discussion about it. I just wanted to float it, which is just, should we just close PRs that are multiple months old and are awaiting user feedback and no one responded? Seems like everyone. Okay, cool.
It's such a dick maneuver, but yes.
Well, I was imagining you could do something like first it said, I've never used one of these systems.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
first
The
I'm
one
like,
I've
hey, are
seen
you
is
still?
it makes a comment and says, if you don't comment on this in the next week, we're going to close it. something like that. So it's like
Yeah,
a two-step
exactly.
process supposed to get. Yeah.
I think that makes sense. I will stop the